Hello, peasants. Today we're going to be ranking all of the US constitutional amendments. And I'm going to keep this video as short as possible because nobody gives a fuck about my political opinion. And you all have better things to do with your time. Alright, who am I kidding? Let's get started. Alright, First Amendment, the freedom of speech and right to exercise religion. And I think this is a pretty clear-cut F tier. I don't think the First Amendment should have been ratified at all, because it gives more freedoms and more rights to the people, and I'm not about that. And I don't agree with the right to freely exercise religion, because ideally there would be a state-mandated religion worshiping me as their god. Alright, moving on. Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia and the right to bear arms. Once again, this is a easy F tier. The people do not need guns. The only person who should have guns is me. I am my own military police, and because of that, there will be no need to regulate a militia if I crush all the dissenters myself. So yeah, I don't think that the Second Amendment should have been ratified either. Third Amendment prevents the government from forcing citizens to provide lodging for soldiers. And I think this is a pretty solid amendment, I think. Restricting government power is not a good thing, but we don't have a military, so any soldiers being quartered would be rebels. So not offering them aid would be a positive. So yeah, B tier. Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. I don't think there's much to be said here. You'll find that I am not a very big fan of most of the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, because surprisingly, they give rights to the individual, and I don't like that very much. So yeah, for the Fourth Amendment, I am all for searching my citizens whenever I want. Should not have been ratified. Fifth Amendment, the rights and protections given to criminals. Once again, should not have been ratified. I don't want to give rights to the people, criminal or otherwise, and of course I care even less about due process of law. The Sixth Amendment, the right to a fair trial. Once again, I want you to guess based on the previous context as to where I might rank this amendment. And here's a hint, this amendment gives rights to the individual. And if you thought this was going in the should not have been ratified tier, you are wrong. This is going in D tier, for no other reason than to spite you. Seventh Amendment, civil trials, the right to a jury if the value of your case is more than $20. Once again, juries and fairness are not things that I am a fan of, but I do like the part where it says that jury trials are only mandated if the case involves property of more than $20. And so this honestly might even be our first A tier amendment, because the concept of money is honestly a backwards one under my ideal system, because, well, all the property would be owned by me. All property would be not owned by the individual or the state, but by me. And so the economy really becomes nothing more than the equivalent of two kindergartners trading their toy trucks and toy boats back and forth, because they know that it doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the school, and the economy belongs to me. So really, nobody would be getting a jury in their trials, because no property is worth more than $20. So honestly, now that I think about it, this amendment could be a pretty big draw to appeal to the traditionalists, to suppress any thoughts of a rebellion that they might have. Because where people might say, oh no, Jerry deleted the whole original Constitution, but we actually might even be able to keep this clause. So, gotta keep the conservatives happy somehow, right? So yeah, pretty high A tier. Alright, Eighth Amendment, and we're back to more rights. Preventing the government from imposing cruel and unusual punishment? Ridiculous. Yeah, not sure what more needs to be said here. Never should have been ratified. But then again, the death penalty is, arguably a violation of the Eighth Amendment. And no, I don't support the death penalty. I believe in the value of a human life. There is always more labor value to be forcibly extricated from a citizen. So honestly, this could be moved up to D tier. Ninth Amendment. People have additional rights outside of the Bill of Rights. Nope. That's all I need to know. I don't know what the Founding Fathers were thinking with this one. Never should have been ratified. So yeah. Nope. 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and the people. Honestly, I don't have a problem with this. Once again, it's not the federal government or the states, or the people for that matter, who have the power. It's me. And I think that this could even go in S tier, because Honestly, I could just use it as an excuse to not give power to anyone, almost like a pair of parents leading their child around when the kid asks for a toy. I could take all the federal power and tell them that the states now have their powers, and then take all of the states' powers and people's powers, and then tell them to blame the federal government, which is a pretty nice deal. So yeah, S tier. 11th Amendment, the judicial branch of government. Judicial power should not be construed against states. I don't care. I don't even know what that means. This doesn't do anything, so I'm ranking it as a run-of-the-mill C-tier amendment. 12th Amendment, revising the presidential election process. It was a complicated change ratified in... Alright, I'm back. I just survived a assassination attempt, and I assure you that the assassin has been dealt with. Let this be a warning to all of you. Poison will not take me down. Anyways, the 12th Amendment, ratified in 1804, changes the vice president and presidential election process, so the vice president is no longer just whoever got second place. Oh right, they talked about this in Hamilton. I probably should have given this more importance than to just sideline it by shoehorning a assassination bit, because people might actually know this one. But then again, who cares about constitutional law? So yeah, I don't really care about it once again. I think it's a solid C-tier amendment. We're flipping this whole system on its head anyways, so this really just becomes not a bad amendment, not a good amendment. It's just wonderfully mediocre. Alright, 13th Amendment. Now we're talking the emancipation, freedom. All slaves are no longer slaves. This is good. Morally good. This is morally good, and therefore I support it. Alright, 14th Amendment, redefining what it means to be a citizen of the United States. Now this is getting interesting. You'd think that I'd dislike this one because it expands the scope of what is considered American and therefore receives more civil rights, but this has no purpose if there are no civil rights in the first place, because I don't really think that being a citizen of a state should guarantee you more rights than a non-citizen, because I think that everybody should have the same amount of rights, which is to say, no rights. So yeah, B tier, solid amendment. 15th Amendment, the right to vote. I think that this is a pretty good amendment. I'm all for the right to vote. I think that we should have as many people participate in the voting process as possible to ensure an effective government. And, I think that voting is a great way to elect a leader, as long as there is only one candidate on the ballot, which is me. So yeah, 15th Amendment, A tier. 16th Amendment gives Congress the power to collect income tax. So really, I'm kind of conflicted on this one. On one hand, it gives the government more power, which is good. But on the other hand, that power lies in Congress, which doesn't matter, and that power manifests in being able to collect tax, which also doesn't matter because, as I mentioned before, the economy just doesn't exist. I own everything anyways, so what's the point of just shuffling my own money around? But in principle, I agree with the amendment, so I guess it's a solid B tier. The 17th Amendment details how U.S. senators are elected. This is in a similar situation as the 12th Amendment, where the election process really doesn't matter because ideally I would be king and there would be no Congress outside of that. So once again, right next to the 12th Amendment, C tier, middle of the road, doesn't have any positive or negative impact, it just exists. The 18th Amendment, the famous prohibition, made the production, sale, and transport of alcohol illegal. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I think that alcohol is one of the best tools that we have to placate the masses. And, once again, it doesn't really matter if the masses are placated or not, because I own all the firearms, so if they ever try to rebel, I'll just, use my guns. So, yeah, I have to say I agree with where their heads were when they came up with the 18th Amendment, because I do agree with banning the production of commodities. I think that the government, well, not the government, me, I should control the means of production. So yeah, B tier. 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. This is exactly like the 15th Amendment. I welcome more voters. I'm still the only option on the ballot, though. A tier. 20th Amendment. Alright, we're in the final stretch, almost done! The 20th Amendment just said that the presidential terms now have a length. I don't have a problem with this. Once again, I'm the king. So yeah, doesn't affect me, restricts the power of opposing politicians. Well, aspiring politicians. And if they were real politicians, I probably would have already had them suicided. So yeah, pretty good B tier. 21st Amendment repealed the prohibition. So before we even talk about the actual amendment itself and why repealing the prohibition might have been a good thing, I think that as a matter of principle, the government should never go back on its word. At least when I am ruling, I will never admit a mistake or go back on a decision. I think it makes a ruler look incredibly weak. So just based on that and that alone, the 21st Amendment is going in the should not have been ratified tier. 22nd Amendment. All right. I am now realizing that the 22nd Amendment is the actual amendment that limits presidential tenure to 2 terms. The 20th Amendment actually just says on which arbitrary day the president is inaugurated and on which day of the year the presidential term ends. But I am not going to go back on my decisions. So the 22nd Amendment is just going to go right next to the 20th Amendment in B tier, and we're going to forget that all happened. 23rd Amendment is a very boring amendment. It just allows DC to have electors. There's not much more to be said here. It's a boring amendment and a waste of time to talk about. The Electoral College isn't going to matter under my regime. This is a waste of time. This is going in D tier and we're moving. 24th Amendment abolishes poll taxes, and that's a good thing. I think that the voting process should be as easy as possible so that I can have as many votes as possible. But then again, it's taxes, and under me there would still be no taxes altogether. So instead of going in A tier with the 15th and 19th Amendments, this is going in B tier. Still pretty good, but not sitting quite as high as the 15th or 19th because it's not quite as good. And 25th Amendment details what to do if a president dies and how to succeed him. I am immortal. 26th Amendment. 18-year-olds are now able to vote. Good, more people voting for me. A tier. 27th Amendment. Salaries of Congress. I don't care. D tier. Alright, and that does it. This is my constitutional amendments tier list, and if any of you have objections to this tier list, please let me know. Please let me know exactly what objections you have, and preferably affix a full name and address to your comment. I will be sure to deal with you accordingly.